Hey everyone, Muckluck here, and today I'd like to talk about how Diablo 4 is shaping up after having tried out the beta over the last weekend. Over the years, I have played Diablo 1, Hellfire, 2, its expansion, D3 and its expansion, Every, Single, Torchlight, Grim Dawn, Last Epoch, and a little bit of Path of Exile. This gave me a lot of points of comparison for ARPGs against what we saw this weekend. First off, let's talk about the beta problems. The beta did not go smoothly, however, it is a beta. Many people were unable to log in, there were 2 to 4 hour queue times, people would get disconnected and get put back to the back of the line. I actually know of one streamer, Grubby, well known for his Warcraft 3 content. He was actually getting a crash at a certain cutscene that I won't spoil, and every time he'd get to that cutscene, it would actually kill his NVIDIA NVENC encoder, which would then not only kick him out of the game, but it would also crash his stream, and he would have to restart from scratch. So there were a lot of issues. I myself was able to get into the game after a 1 hour queue time. Fortunately, I did that way before my scheduled stream time, so we were able to spend about 5 hours on stream playing the game, and at the end of it, I did get disconnected, but we were wrapping up, so it wasn't a big deal to us at that time. Additionally, anytime we were in town or in the open world area, which was near other people, we were getting a lot of lag. It was very jerky, is kind of teleporting around, a little bit of rubber banding, stuff like that. But when I was in dungeons, when I say dungeons, I just mean like any solo indoor area, such as what you're seeing on the screen right now, it was totally fine. The game felt fine, it felt responsive, and I didn't have any problems with it whatsoever. Now, all of those issues I just mentioned can all be chalked up to, well, it's a beta, and, you know, I'm sure that they will get those knocked out by the launch, or I would certainly hope so. Returning to dark themes. Not that the Diablo series has ever strayed away from the dark themes, but they certainly have kind of leaned back away from it a little bit. I feel like D4 is very much diving right back into that. For those who don't remember, the trailer for Diablo 1 immediately shows a raven or a crow pecking at a corpse, and it plucks out its eyeball and begins to eat it. That was how the genre started. In Diablo 4, you know, we've got a lot of guys getting ritually sacrificed right at the beginning. Without saying who, when, where, or why, there is a cutscene later on where a person is beaten to death, and it is not a quick death. So it very much feels like they are going back to the dark nitty-gritty. There is we'll say a method of fighting shown later on by a certain NPC that just made my jaw drop open at one point and made me think, oh my god, the Warhammer universe would love to copy this, because it was just very, very dark. So I like it. I mean, I think a lot of us that like the Diablo genre love the, you know, the grim dark fantasy of this world, and it was kind of cool seeing them lean so far forward back into that content. So yeah, plus points for that. Graphics. The graphics were fantastic. If I am overlooking the parts where the game was really laggy and stuff in town, the cinematics were beautiful, the landscapes were great. You can see some of the gameplay on the screen right now. Spells, a lot of eye candy stuff like that, especially the lightning spells. I myself played Sorcerer for about 5 hours, and I played a Hardcore Thief for about 5 hours, but I will come back to that. I've not yet put any time into Barbarian. And for those who don't know, this beta weekend only had those 3 classes. The Druid and the Necromancer are on the character selection screen, but they are not available until the next weekend. So the graphics, as far as just the environment, looked amazing. They looked dark. They looked fantastic. The graphics as far as like combat and spells and stuff like that, all of that looked fantastic as well. And the cutscenes, I mean, Blizzard's never really failed us when it comes to cutscene quality, I think, in any of their games. But, well, there was that one Warcraft 3 thing where Illidan fought Arthas, but we're not going to talk about that. But it looks good. It looks good. Sound design. Similarly, if you break it down between music and then combat, the music was fine. It was good. No earworms or anything. Like, I can still play the tune of Tristram in my head. There was nothing like that so far in the beta that I experienced. However, the abilities had some major ear candy. There was a couple of traps on the rogue that you could put down on the ground. And when you put them down, you heard this sound like steel wires tightening and being pulled taut for just a few seconds. And it was just, it sounded very cool. So, very big props to the sound design. very much liked that. Many abilities recognizable from previous titles. As mentioned, I've played every single game in the Diablo genre except Immortal, but I'm not going to talk about that. There were spells and abilities on here that were recognizable from all of the previous games. Things like Firebolt, Firewall, and Chain Lightning from the very first Diablo. There was, Winter Orb from Diablo 2. There was Ball Lightning, which was a Demon Hunter skill for Elemental Arrow in D3, but it was a Sorcerer skill in D4. Now, because of that, that also makes it seem like they've condensed many of the classes. So the Sorcerer had skills that I recognized from the Spellbook of Diablo 1, the Sorceress of Diablo 2, and the Wizard of Diablo 3, and like I said, there was that one skill from the Demon Hunter of Diablo 3. Basically, anything elemental seems to have been slapped onto this guy if it was related to fire or cold or lightning. No sign of really arcane stuff, but that's what we've seen so far. On that same note, the Rogue seems to be a combination of Diablo 1's Rogue, Diablo 2's Assassin, Diablo 2's Amazon, and some of Diablo 3's Demon Hunter. So anything dexterous, agile has all been kind of wrapped into that package. Now, as a result of that, there has been some things I've thought were really cool, like, oh wow, this class has both of these abilities, and other things that made me kind of sad. Because it's like, okay, well, the Rogue is the guy who gets the traps and stuff like that, and I don't see ability X or ability Y that I loved in the franchise before. I guess that's gone. I don't know if we're getting that back. As a quick example, in Diablo 2, you could play a trap assassin and throw down lightning sentries or death sentries, which was like a little tripod that shot lightning or exploded nearby corpses. That kind of evolved in Diablo 3 into becoming the summon sentry turret, which was like a tiny little ballista or a little crossbow on a tripod that the Demon Hunter could summon, and you could get custom engineering passive and get a whole build based around those if you wanted to. No sign of that in this game, and I definitely will miss that. I hope they add that back in later on. Maybe they'll add it in like a DLC class or a expansion class or something like that. But right now, the closest class to that concept is the Rogue, and they don't have any skill resembling that at all. And that's a great time to go into the skill tree, which you can see in the background there for just a moment. The skill tree works like a combination of Diablo 2 and Diablo 3's trees. Now, in Diablo 2, you would spend points in the parts of the tree you had access to, and that would allow you to go further down. Like you would have to have 5 points spent to get to the next row and 10 points spent to get to the next row, or something similar to that. It's been a few years, but that was the general idea. And then once you had spent X number of points, you could go all the way to the bottom row, and you could put points into the ultimate abilities and then start dumping points into that. Now, Diablo 3 did it differently. Diablo 3 didn't have the tree at all. They had these little runes. So it's like you, as a wizard, would get summoned Hydra, and then you could choose to just keep it default, which is a Fire Hydra, change it to Poison Hydra, which would allow it to do stacking damage over time, or Frost Hydra, or Electric Hydra, or Arcane Hydra, which did big explosions, or I believe Mammoth Hydra, which just left like a carpet of fire on the ground instead of shooting fireballs. And there was a lot of different flavors of it. In this one, each skill has like one small fork after it on the tree, and you can basically choose A or B. I would say it's simplified, and it's very much more approachable. So if you had a lot of people that were coming into this and this was their first ARPG, I think they'd be fine. I think they'd be absolutely fine. It's not overwhelming. It's not like Path of Exile's massive skill tree, and it's not like the Constellations on Grim Dawn. But at the same time, as someone who loves customization, I was a little sad to see some of it go. Now, we have not gotten a great look at the Paragon system. We got a few teaser images of like a massive tree of branches. Certain skills could kind of intertwine with the branches right next to them. So the Hydra could intertwine with Fireskin, which was a buff you'd put on yourself, and that would allow the Hydra to possibly cast Fireskin on you and also other nearby allies. That said, they could only, at least in the teaser images we got, they could only interact with their neighbor. And the entire Hydra branches of the tree that we saw in the teaser images were all fire stuff. So that meant if you had any love for the poison of Frost or Electric or Arcane Hydras, they're gone. Unless they add some unique item later that makes it to where while equipping this item it changes your Hydra, which they might do. They very much love their items that completely change builds in the Diablo series. those customization options don't appear to be there at all, which kind of saddens me a little bit. Now, back onto the topic of customization from equipment, you've got extraction, which is similar to the Herondric Cube in Diablo 3, where you could take the special effect from one orange item and extract it, and then later you could put it onto another item. Except this one, it's a little bit different. If you beat a dungeon, like an optional dungeon that you just come across in the open world in Diablo 4, you can unlock like a random buff. And then in town, you could pay a fee and put that buff onto an item, effectively turning like a yellow item into an orange, like a pseudo orange item. And then you have got that special effect on there. Things like, your ice shards can now pierce when you fire them, stuff like that. Now, that said, if we were to compare this class customization to other action RPGs as a whole, in my opinion, it leaves me missing things from other games. So again, Path of Exile had the massive skill tree, which was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. I love Path of Exile. I've played it a lot. I showed that earlier, but it is overwhelming. Grim Dawn had a small, easily digestible skill tree for the classes, but then had this massive constellation network that was similar to the Path of Exile thing. Last Epoch, they've got a smaller skill tree, but they have one for every single skill. So you can open any skill and customize it many, many, many different ways, and it was marvelous. It was marvelous. So you had a lot more customization than what you've got here, but at the same time, it's also easily digestible. It seems pretty clear that Diablo 4 is going the route of, they'll add in more and more custom builds later on through the use of unique items, which is fine. It's not my personal favorite, because that means that, like, if you start a new season, you may not be able to play your favorite build until you get just that one right item, because it's not something native to your class. But that's what they've chosen to do so far. On the topic of would you have to play previous titles in order to enjoy this title? No, although there are absolutely some throwbacks. You would understand a bit more the background of the story if you played the previous Diablo games, but honestly, if you just jumped into this one and you haven't played any previously Diablo game, and you're just, you're a person who's willing to fight, and you're in a very dark world, and demons are bad. Like, that's really all you need to know, and you'll be able to enjoy the game about as much as anybody else. There are some throwbacks to the first Diablo games. One that I thought was really cool. This is a section of the cutscene from Diablo 1 when you opened it. Okay, it shows this village. This is a section of the cutscene from Diablo 4 when you open it. Same town. So I just thought that was really cool. I don't know how many people have noticed that. Maybe I'm late to the party. I thought that was extremely cool. They're just a little, there's a few little throwbacks like that to the original game. There is also brief mention of what happened to Tristram for those interested. I'm not going to spoil it. I'll let you discover that later on, but it is a very brief mention, and if you hadn't played the game before, you'd probably walk right past it and not even realize what they're talking about. And you would still enjoy the story. So, the open world. So, going into this, I did not realize you're in multiplayer whether you like it or not. I did not realize that. When I, jump into it, in the previous games, you only really saw other people if you invited them to your game or you joined their game and they invited you. In this one, in the open world, I was actually doing an event at one point, and a random person walked up and started helping me. And I was just like, who are you and where did you get the audacity? What are you doing in my game? And my chat started laughing at me. They're like, the world's open. Unless you're in a dungeon or something, you will come across other people. And I was like, ugh. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Especially with all the problems in the beta, it definitely brings back that whole feeling. It's like, why do I need an online internet connection if I want to play this solo? Because it's like you could be playing single player, could be playing hardcore, and then because of a disconnect from the server, you get kicked out of the game and your character could end up dead. I hate that. I don't think if you were playing single player, I don't think it should require you to be connected to their server. Alas, ever since Diablo 3, they have been continuing to do that. So here we are. Aside from the open world, when you're in anywhere that seems to be indoors, a cellar or inside like a dungeon or a cave or something, it goes into just like your own shard, I think it is, which is like single player version of the game. And you're away from other people. Otherwise, you will come across them, you will pass by them in the open. Open world has a lot of space. I don't think we get a horse in the beta. I saw hints that we would get a horse later on, such as like, buy the collector's edition and get this fancy saddle, stuff like that. We didn't get it during the beta, or at least I didn't see how to get it. I didn't come across it. So there was a lot of space. Like even the town was massive, and it would take a long time to just walk from one end of the town to the other. So travel was definitely a thing. Events was a thing as well, though. And if you are a fan of the Guild Wars 2 open world stuff, it was very similar to that. Like you would just come across random events and you could join in. And if you were the first person there, you would start the event. If you were you'd see a caravan of like people hiding under their caravans, and they'd be screaming for help. And you click on one of them, and then waves of attackers would come. And it was basically survive for 2 minutes. At the end of 2 minutes, for every person, NPC who stayed alive, you got an increased reward. It was very cool. It was very cool. Felt like something you would come across. It felt like a world that was like overrun with demons. You'd come across like people doing spooky rituals, and you would have an opportunity to try to handle that. And sometimes other people would just join in during these events. On that note, there is also world bosses. Now, I played this for 10 hours. I did 5 hours on Sorcerer and 5 hours on Rogue. I never came across a world boss. I would not know that world bosses existed if I had not seen other streamers doing it. So at certain times, at certain moments, there are areas in the world where world bosses will spawn, and just hordes of people can join in and fighting them. I've seen some people fail to take down the world bosses, even with hordes of people there. I've seen people try them on hardcore, and all the melee people just dying left and right. They are challenging, but if you kill them, every player there gets like 2 to 10 unique items. So they're extremely profitable if you can get in there and help kill one. And on softcore, of course, it's safer because you can just, fight the world boss, die, fight it, die, whatever. On, hardcore, of course, it's much more of a gamble whether or not you want to attempt that. On that topic, I think a good segue from that is talking about the different classes and how they balance right now. Now, right this second, Sorcerer OP. Sorcerer OP. Like, I went through the entire available story on Sorcerer. I used like 2 healing potions. And I was like, man, this is really easy. And I was playing on veteran difficulty, which is the highest setting currently available. And so I made the rogue, and I made the rogue on hardcore veteran. I think I used 50 potions on him. It was a whole different game. So same difficulty and same player, but it was a lot more challenging on the rogue to get through content than it was on the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer had Summon Hydra, which, hails from all the previous Diablo games. And, if any time there was an enemy where you had to focus more on dodging and running around, you would just summon the Hydra. And the whole time you're focusing on moving around, that Hydra was chipping the boss down. It was just hitting it over and over and over and over. However, also, while I'm looking at what's on screen right now, Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning is an interesting beast because in most video games, if there's a Chain Lightning, it's great against a horde of mobs. It's bad against single target. However, in Diablo 4, they've taken a different approach. Chain Lightning will bounce off yourself. It will not hurt you, but if it needs to use you for a bounce, it will. Which means if you're fighting a group of enemies, you could just Chain Lightning kill the little ones. If you're fighting one big enemy, you can Chain Lightning the big one, and it'll hit big you, big you, big you. It'll hit it 6 times. So if you've cleared out all the trash, it becomes a good single target damaging skill. Which effectively means Chain Lightning is good at everything. So it not just the Sorcerer was good compared to the Rogue, but the Sorcerer was, like, some of his skills were really good compared to the other skills. Like, the Hydra was in a cluster of skills called Summoning, and there was Hydra, there was Summon Ice Blades, imagine 2 flying frozen swords running, flying around and cutting things, and there was a thing called Storm Spear, I believe. And Storm Spear it looked kind of like a Chain Lightning bolt, but it orbited around you, and then it would dive down and go through enemies and just pierce them. Both of those skills, Ice Blades and Storm Spear, had like 5-second cooldown, 5-second duration, 20-second cooldown. And they were weaker than Hydra, which you could have out 100% of the time. So some of the skills, even compared to their neighbors, it's like, okay, this stuff's gonna have to get fine-tuned later, because right now it's like there's no way after trying these anyone's going to use that or that, unless there's some unique item later on that gives it times 10 damage or something. So that was a thing. A lot of people playing Barbarian told me it was very difficult on hardcore right now. Also, part of that is there's some class-specific quests in the beta that are available for Sorcerer and the Rogue, but they're not available for the Barbarian because the Barbarian class-specific quest is in an area that's not in this beta. So, like, you can see it off the map, but you cannot get there right now. So, he will get more power later on. It's just right now within the confines of this beta, the Barbarian, it might be safe to argue he falls behind a bit unless he just gets some lucky unique items, which, there are a lot of those later on. But yeah, I think that touches on most of the topics about this I wanted to talk about. Right now, I think this is shaping up to be one of the greats, which honestly is a breath of fresh air. In my time as a gamer, I saw decades where everything made by Blizzard was absolutely flawless. It was made of solid gold, and they could do no wrong. Like, if they had to delay a game, you know what gamers would say? They'd be like, well, it'll be out when it's ready, and it'll be good. And then there was the last 10 years, we just had re-releases. We had World of Warcraft Vanilla, World of Warcraft The Burning Crusade re-release, World of Warcraft Frozen Throne re-release, Overwatch 2, which is basically the same game as Overwatch, Diablo Immortal, Jesus Christ, Diablo 2 Remaster, Warcraft 3 Refunded, where they broke the original game and left it, and it's still in that state. It was just like re-release after re-release after re-release after re-release. So this, since like Hearthstone, this is like the first time they've made something really new. And so far, it's being well received by the community. My YouTube subscription feed is filled with videos from people like, Quinn and Zizaran and, reviewing the game, and they're liking what they're seeing right now. Again, I've got good and bad things to say. I miss some of the more in-depth class customization. Like, I'm not saying give us the giga talent tree of Path of Exile, but this, the choices are so small here. Like, if you got Hydra, there's left Hydra and right Hydra. That's it. I would like more choices than what we currently have. However, I think that the route they're going is just you're going to have to find the unique item for whatever build you want after the stuff comes out. And then, of course, there's the Paragon system, which we have only seen teasers for, so that could change things up as well. But yeah, right now it is looking quite solid aside from beta issues. I'm very eager to try out my favorite classes from the franchise, which are the Druid and the Necromancer, which are available during the beta test next weekend. And that's all my current thoughts on Diablo 4. If you made it this far, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you want to hear more of me blabbering, and I'll see you next time.